We are on.
Welcome everyone to our class on Sefer Higayon. We've progressed pretty far into the middle section of the Sefer. As I like to do is just give a little orientation, get us back into the system. The Ramchal divides his Sefer into three parts. Asik HaHigayon, where he tells us about concepts, what types and what levels and how they're built. And we're in the middle section here, which is called ch14. And that section has three parts. The first is where we're holding right now. We're holding in Bir HaShemos, pretty much toward the end of Bir HaShemos. After we understand terms, then we're going to go into the statements and syllogisms. A lot of those things will be familiar to us because of our work we did in ch14. And then finally, his last section is going to tell us how to apply the Sefer. And we're going to have a special treat because we found in the library, the National Jewish Library, another section of the book, which was actually a way that the Ramchal, an addenda that the Ramchal wrote about how to do analysis and create statements with these terms that we're using.
So you just found this?
No, it's actually in the book.
Oh,
we actually printed it in the back. It's called conification. But I was actually looking for ch14, one of the missing parts in ch14 in Kusha, and then I was looking through the microfilm and I saw Sefer Higayon. I looked through it at the end. It was this great discovery. So we did print that. But that's a very important thing because you get, he takes us from the abstract to the practical and gives us some examples. Of course, our aim is always, now we're going to put this back into the Gemara and use it as a tool to help us clarify our learning, B'ezras Hashem. Okay, so we're in the middle part of the book. Chelke Higayon, we said there were terms, statements, and syllogisms. That's the basic system here. Let's look at our terms. We're holding at a very important part now. There's three terms now we're going to investigate, and they're going to talk about similarities and dissimilarities in concepts. Okay, things which are similar and things which are different. So I'm going to highlight just the main sections that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how things are similar. If I can ever get this little thing working. Not working. Okay. Okay, it doesn't want to work. It doesn't matter. We're going to talk about concepts which are similar and how they're similar. Like if you have Arbavas Nezikin, those four things could be a kind in a category of Nezikin. They are called similar concepts. In that case, they're similar cases. Then we're going to talk about things which are not similar, dissimilar. And they'll either be different or opposites. So the Gemara is going to, or the Mishnah actually is going to tell us that those four concepts are indeed, although they're similar because they share a certain common quality of being Nezikin, but there is important differences that make them different, whether it be their ways to go out and do damage or Balei Chaim. Finally, in the book, in the chapter on things being dissimilar or unsimilar, he's going to talk about opposites. That's an extension of different. Okay, you have things which are different, but things which are opposite means that the affirmation of one is the denial of the other. So that's our work. I don't know how much we'll be able to accomplish. I don't want to just run through it. I like to think about what we're doing. So that's our work for today. The work for today will be discussing concepts and how we determine concepts are similar and dissimilar. And dissimilar will have different and opposite. So let's try to keep this with us, this little chart, because as you know, the Ramchal has all these little subcategorizations. That's his whole thing, is to make a few large categories and divide them into the parts, into subcategories. Okay, so I'm going to keep that open, and we're going to start here with what he calls nerachem. Okay, nerachem, which are similar terms. So let's read together. Nerachem mizdamim o besug o bemin o bemikrim. When we say that terms, we're not learning a lot of times it's cases, but when we say terms are similar, so they could be similar because they are minim, types in a category, or because they're individuals in that category, or because they share a certain quality. So that's how he spells it out. He says, when we things could be similar because they're mistabim haminim. So if we say that they're arbavs nezikin, so they are types in the category of nezikin, and they have a similarity that they're dakim hazik, when you have the min, which is the lower part, the type, so you can say Klal Yisrael, and then you could say each Jew, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, are particulars in that type, and of course they're mizdama, they are nerachim, because they are similar one to the other, being the same type. And finally, you have things which are similar because they share a certain quality, a certain mikra. Mish lo mahus echad, it has the same essence, or kamus echad, it has the same amount of something. Now, he's going to divide this similarities into shavim and domim. Okay. V'emschalek l'shavim o domim. Okay, what's the difference?
Could you just go back for a second?
We just did here with these three little types here. Yeah. Go ahead.
How did you translate the word ne'erachim? Ne'erachim mistamim? What does the word ne'erachim mean?
Okay, the ne'erachim in the chart there, you may have seen the word commensurate. I just changed it because I thought it was a little too fancy word, which not too many people understand. Basically, things are similar. They're similar. Why are they similar? Because they exist in a certain category. Everything in a class has a similarity, correct?
Oh, so he's saying ne'erachim mistanim, that the word ne'erachim, which means some things of similar types, are similar. Either they're similar in the sug, or in the min, or in the mikrim. Okay. So
exactly.
That's what he's saying. Okay.
Okay. Nerach means to arrange something, to arrange something next to one another, okay? So that's why I said similarity. If you look on the other side of the chart, it says bilti shavim. So that means that they're not
dissimilar.
Okay. Dissimilar, okay? Good. So when you say things are similar, so one way of saying that they're similar is that they exist in the same class, in the same category, right? That makes them similar. Another way is because they share certain qualities, similar qualities, and he's going to spell it out here in one moment. Okay, so now in the mikrim, it means things that have a certain one of the mikrim, a certain amount. He says, "Omahus," its essence, or kamus echad, or its amount. Mischalkin l'shavim b'domim. Okay, so he's going to break that down here in this chart to things which are equivalent, shavim, and things which are comparable. What's the difference between something which is equivalent and comparable? So remember, the Ramchal always defines his terms. That's what we can't import our concepts from other places necessarily, because he's creating a language for us to use in analysis. So let's see what he says shavim is. Shavim, things which are equivalent, as I said, they could be dinim, terms, objects on your table. It really doesn't matter. But shavim hem hamishtabim bekamos echusam. Things which are equal in the amount of their quality. They have the same. They share a quality together, and they have the same amount of that quality. Derech mashal. In Ne'emar, kol kach nehahav hachesed kamo hamishpat. Say you make the following statement, and you say that chesed is just as adorable, as lovable as mishpat, as din. הכוונה בזה שכל כך טעם יש בחסד שיהיה נאהב כמו שיש במשפט. The intention of that statement would be, or that observation, is that the reason to love chesed is just equal to the reason to love mishpat. V'nimtzu hachesed v'hamishpat shavim b'kamos echus zeh shebehem. So now it comes out that these two concepts, chesed and mishpat, are equal to each other in a certain quality of being lovable and a certain amount of love. In other words, they're each, maybe we'll use the word desirable. Love is a little strange to use in concepts, even though you use it. But they're equally desirable. Dahainu hiyos nehav. Okay? So the two concepts are really different, chesed and mishpat, right? They're really, in a certain way, they're even opposites, doing loving kindness and doing din. But they do share a certain mikra called, a certain concept of a mikra called their being desirable or loved. Okay? So, and in that case, we're saying that they're equal. They're equally desirable. Or equally lovable. It sounds a little strange, we'll say it, okay? So those, that's what he means by the mikra, which is shavim. That means you have two concepts. They don't have to really be like each other at all. Here they're almost opposites. One is chesed and one is mishpat. But in a certain aspect, they are equal in their ability or in their desirability, let's say. Okay, is that clear?
Yeah. So the question, what's bekamos echos? And is he saying in the measurement of echos?
The amount of love, so to speak, that you should have for one, you should have for another.
Right. So echos is usually you talk about kamos and echos are two different measures.
Well, there's a quality.
Right.
The quality is lovability, and the kamos is how much of it.
Right. So he's saying that you're going to say that they are shavim in the amount of ne'ahav, of ava one could have for chesed and mishpat.
Exactly. Right. So that's really okay. That's what he says. Now he's going to show how that works out a little better for us. Okay. Now he says, he's going to tell some rules when things are really shavim. So he says, Ma shenofel be'echad min hashavim nofel bechavero. Something that happens to one of the shavim, one of the equivalents, is going to happen to the other. Since the two things are equivalent to each other, so what happens to one should happen to the other. Now he warns us about this. He says, Perishot. Zet tzarech sheyuvan b'ma shenofel be'echad mehen mitzad havchana sheyesh bo. This is, you have to be careful here, because it's only true that what happens to one will happen to the other. What happens to chesed will happen to the mishpat, only in that aspect of ahava, right? Don't try to move it somewhere else. And that's what he says. Zet tzar sheyuvan b'ma shenofel be'echad mehen mitzad havchana sheyesh bo. Sheba hu mishtav lechavero. It's in that specific aspect, and only that aspect, that they're equal. So we would presume that in that aspect, whatever happens to one happens to the other. Derech mashal. He's going to spell it out for us a little. He says like this: Hamishpat kechesed liyos nehav Since mishpat and chesed are both equally desirable, now, yitzavu alav hashlemim. So then a person who is a sholem, an adam sholem, should love them equally. V'zeh, ki tzivui hashlemim alav tolui b'hiyos ne'av. The imperative or the obligation to get both of them is v'zeh ki tzivu hashlemim alav tolui b'hiyos ne'av. A person who is an Adam Sholem, so he will equally love one as the other. Amnam, im tomar lechesed tzarek rach lev, but if you're talking about this Adam Sholem and you say, well, you know, chesed needs a very soft heart, so lo tigzor mepnei zeh shel mishpat tzarek right?
Yeah, because there's no connection between the two.
Exactly. That was never that was when we said they were desirable. It was never in that aspect at all. Right? It was only its desirability in one specific prat. That's the imperative to gain it. Okay, you should love it as much as the other one, but it doesn't mean that they're equivalent in other aspects. Okay, so this is a simple rule, but it's a lot of times people will fall into error by saying because the two things are equal in one aspect, it's necessarily equal into another aspect.
Right,
okay?
right. So you have to know which aspect. Right. So you have to know what the underlying reason for each aspect is, and therefore whether or not you could say that if this one has it, the other one has to have it also.
That's right. Even when we're talking about our famous Arba Abbas Nazikun, that's the whole thing. What is the Sada Shavish? In what way is the shore like or unlike the boar? Okay, and you have to be very careful about that. Okay, okay, good. That's the rule number one. That this desirability or this shavim is only shavim in a particular aspect. Okay. Rule number two, he says. מה ששייך בו אחד מן השווים, גם חברו יהיה שייך בו. What's shaykh to one of the shavim, in other words, let's say chesed, so then its friend also should be shaykh to it. Derech mashal. Belev dorish hatov yanuach hachesed. A person who desires goodness, so he will Yanuach HaChesed, I guess, obtain Chesed. So Im Kain Gam Mishpat. So therefore, you should also expect that he has Mishpat. If he's a Lev Tov, so then since Chesed and Mishpat is a requirement for a Adam HaShalom or here a Lev Tov, so if you saw a person who is an Adam HaShalom, he should have one and the other. Okay?
So I don't see the connection because with regard to the connection between Chesed and Mishpat is the Ava that one has for them. So now he's saying Ma sheshech bo echad min hashavim. What is Shaykh? What relates to one of the Shavim, which is, I guess it means the Chesed, for example. Gam chaver yeshech, which should also be by Mishpat. Why? Because they both have Ava. So what does that have to do with Leiv Darish Hatov?
Because what does it mean shaykh? It's if chesed is shaykh to a dorish lev, excuse me,
A Leiv Darish
lev
Tov.
shedorish tov, so then mishpat should be also. That's what he says.
But then you would have to say that chesed has a certain level of ava because people who do chesed have a Leiv Darish Hatov. Right, there has to be some sort of connection between the
yes,
ava
and
and
what
Leiv
exactly
Darish
is?
Tov.
Okay, yeah, we have to add in a few points here. So what he's saying is like these are good midos, right? It's good to have chesed, it's good to have mishpat, right? So anyone who has good midos, should have both of them.
Right.
Since they're both equally desirable, so then any subject who is not a Mishalom, in this case a Darish Tov, I don't know why he switched the words exactly, but you would expect that if we could say that the Chesed is found in Darish Tov, then we should be able to find the Mishpat there also. So if we see that this Dorish Tov is
Shaykh the Chesed,
he should also be Shaykh the Mishpat, because they're equally desirable for a Mashama.
Right, okay.
Okay. Now this one he says, Shnayim mishtavim el hashlishi mishtavim b'neihem. He says two things which are mishtaveh to a third thing must be equal to each other.
It sounds like geometry.
It doesn't it? What does it mean? If you have chesed and mishpat,
Chesed and mishpat were both
equally desirable.
Or to a third thing. If chesed and mishpat are both equal to din. I don't know. Could they both be equal to din? Or chesed and mishpat are both found in gedei. If chesed and mishpat, I don't know. I have to.
Well, let's say mathematically, right? If
A equals B and C equals B, right?
Right.
Then A and C are equal to each other. That's what he's saying.
A equals
B.
If A equals B
and C
equals B, then A equals C, right?
Right. That's what he's saying.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Right. Yeah. So that's what he's saying. Okay. So that's shavim. Shavim means that there's a certain amount of a certain quality that both of them, these items, have. So for instance, let's bring it down a little more to a practical level. The Av and the Todos in that famous Nezika, right? So the Av is Karen. Excuse me. Let's say Karen is an Av, and it has Todos, like an animal pushing another animal, or squatting on another animal, or kicking another animal. Those are all Todos. Okay, so now they share a certain kamas of an echus with the Av. And what is that? Kavanah lahazik. Okay, so really each of them share the same amount of kavanah lahazik as the Av. Okay, so they're shavim. Now, if it weren't that way, if there was less kavanah in squatting down or kicking, so then you really couldn't learn one from the other. Okay, so they really have to be shavim in that certain echos, in that quality of kavanah lahazik. Okay, good. So those are things which are those are when we say the two objects here, like the two pools of damage, for instance, are shavim. That means that what we can expect in one, we can expect in the other also. Right. So if the one is chayav, the other one should be chayav also. Okay, great. Now, let's look at not shavim, but the next one, which he calls domim. They're not equivalent, but they're comparable. What's the difference between equivalent and comparable? So he says, domim hem o domim be'echus o be'ula o be'hefa. He says, when we say things are comparable, they're comparable either because of a quality, certain quality that they share, or a certain action that they do, or a certain result. A certain result that they have. Okay. Hadinyan Okay, let's see. Hadimyon hu pashut or merkab. Now he's going to show us that there's two types of dimyonot. One he calls pashut, and one he calls merkab. What's the difference? Really just the amount of things you're comparing. The pashut is ben shnayim, and hamerkav is ben arba. There's a two-element comparison and a four-element comparison. Let's let him spell that out. Derech mashal. Okay. The pashut. Ha'adam v'ha'esev domim bechulsha ve'ein kan ela shnei nos'im. We could say that man and grass are comparable because they're both weak, as opposed, I suppose, to a rock or something like that, or metal or steel. Ve'ein kan ela shnei nosim. So that's a comparison between two items. And notice they're not shovim at all. They just happen to both have a quality of weakness, but one could be weaker than the other, but that's not really what we're interested in. We're interested that we can make a certain comparison between them, even though they're not equal. Okay? That's just a simple one-to-one relationship. Hamorkav is like this. Hasar ba'amo v'chovel ba'aniyaso. The minister to his people is like the captain to the ship. Okay? V'hainu v'inyan hashkafa v'hanhada is ruling them, guiding them. Ve'ein hadimyan mishtalem ela ba'arba nosim. So here we have a four-way comparison: the sar and the chovel. That's the minister and the captain of the ship is going to be compared to the people and the ship itself. Okay. Now he gets a lot involved in this in Melitza, which is Bez Hashem. We'll get to that safer. But basically, you have two and four-way comparisons. Okay. Now, comparisons are not equivalents, but you see here what's being compared here, the Hanhaga, is quite different between the Hanhaga of the Sar and his people and the captain and the ship, right? So they just it's a comparison, but really not an equivalence at all. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, really, he's comparing. So it is. I see. Okay. In other words, what he's saying is the sar is really compared to the chovel.
Yes.
But that's the purpose of the goal of the statement. Really, is to compare the sar to the chovel. It's not compared to the and to the aniyah. Because he's saying that. He's saying that because the sar who is guiding his is like a chovel who's guiding his ship. We're not comparing the ship to the we're comparing the sar to the chovel. But I guess the result is a double comparison.
Yeah, right. Exactly, double comparison. Really, we're interested in who's guiding the item. Okay, so we're saying that the sar is really directing or guiding the people. Now, we're saying that can be compared to a captain of a ship.
Right. So really, if you could say the sentence the reverse, you could say that people are guided by the sar, just like a ship is guided by its captain. So that's why you are comparing the people to the ship. Because there is, right?
Yeah, it's a double comparison.
Double comparison. That's why he calls it a morkav. Okay.
Right, it's morkav. Now he's going to get into this in Melitza. It's a fantastic sefer. There he gets into motivation, and in motivation, this is where you use a lot of dimyonos, right? Mishle is just filled with them, right? So he gets into those explanations here. But here, the important thing to realize is a dimyon is bringing out a comparative point, but not saying things are equal. Okay, you couldn't learn halacha, I don't think, from a dimyon. Dimyon is just a mashal of something. Okay, it's not a real equivalent. It's just a mashal to show you a similarity between two things. Okay,
Yep.
so that's the first one, the Persha and the Merkab. Now he says, when you make dimyonot, when you make comparisons, so he says like this: Kol shnayim domim tzarech shiyu gam ken bilti domim. Very interesting. Two things which you compare also have to be uncomparable. Because remember, it's a mashal, it's not a real equivalence. Perisho, what does that mean? Ki hadimyon eino hiyosem echad. The dimyon doesn't make two things the same. Eliyosem shnayim. But it really keeps the two items separate. Sheyed dimyon b'neihem. It's only saying that there's a comparison between the star and the ship. It's not making an equivalence. Okay, so there's really a world of difference between the two. Imkain muchrach hu sheyibadlu be'ez ahevto. So there has to be a very important difference between the two things. V'yizdama achar kach be'ez dimyon. There's really a big difference between the two things, like the captain, the minister and the captain, but they do share a certain dimyon, there is a certain
because if they were
between the two.
If they were similar in all ways, they would be exactly alike, and then you wouldn't have to compare them.
But unlike the mishtavim, you see that he just said above, there really is an equivalence. When you say that you should love chesed as much as din, so as far as the chesed, the love is concerned, there really is, it's an equivalent love between one and the other. Even though the chesed and the din may be different, but as far as the love being expressed, it's the same. But here, in a dimyon, it really is non-equivalent. The way that the captain guides the ship is not really the way that the Tsar guides the nation. You understand? It's not exactly the way it does. There is a comparison to be made, about going through the waves, but it's really only a comparison. It's not an equivalence at all. You hear the subtle difference? It's like a mashal. A mashal is not a reality. It's something that brings out a certain quality in an object. Okay. Derech mashal. Im tomar. He's going to explain it. Adam domel esev hasoda. If you were to say that a man is like the grasses of the field, lo mipnei zeh tigzor im kain sameach min ha'ofer. You wouldn't say that, okay, since you said he was like the grasses of the field, so it must mean that he sprouts from dirt. Ki eino ela dom ela esev be'eze inyanim. It's only that he's comparable to the grass in a certain way. Ach lo hakol. Like we say, Adam is what do we say? I'm surprised I didn't bring it.
Ki Adam eitz hasoda.
Eitz hasoda, right? So what does that mean? That a man has leaves and branches.
Right.
So that obviously doesn't mean that. So it means we're trying to bring out a certain quality. What is Bishara there, by the way? Is this
That's talking about fruit-bearing trees, and you're not supposed to take down fruit-bearing trees, I believe. It's in the
What does that have to do with an Adam? Yeah, what does that have to do with an Adam?
Of course.
What is the comparison? What is the comparison?
Because I think it's saying that the Eitz Hasad is like an Adam. It's like it's a growing thing which bears fruit. Like a person bears fruit.
Like a person bears fruit. Therefore, shouldn't be. Don't think of it as just a rock.
Right. No.
It's very important. Okay.
Somebody took my Dvarim. It's not nearby. So okay, I can't look at it.
Okay, but it's food for thought. But it's very important to consciously understand the difference between things which are shaveh and domeh. Okay.
Right.
Now he says like this: Ma shenofel ve'echad min hadomim. What happens to one of the mizdamim, like the minister, in that certain bechina of anhaga, should happen also to the captain. In other words, he tells his crew what to do. and the minister has to tell his crew what to do also. Okay, again, in that certain aspect. This is the problems of making dimyonots also, because people tend to push dimyonot further than what they were meant to be. Okay, so if you say, okay, a man is an asada, so now you're going to have to look for certain roots in his feet. The legs look like roots, and the hands look like branches, and that really was never what the dimyon was meant to be. Okay, it was only meant to be limited to the aspect it was. Okay, that's what the domim were.
Well, if you're interested, I just went through the last parak in Archas Tzadikim, which is called Yiras Hashem, I think. He says he does the comparison over there because it says that an Adam is a Olam HaKatan. A person is considered a small world. And he goes through each part of the body and he compares it to the world, and he shows that each part of the body has things that are similar to the world. There are streams and rivers, there are veins and that carry water. There are hard things and soft things. So you have like your kneecaps and your elbows are like hard rocks. And he compares it. It goes through pages and pages.
Yeah, well, there he pushes the dimyon.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So you'll argue whether that's really what was meant in the original statement or not.
Right.
But okay, but there is a place where you can't push a dimyon.
Right.
I say it's absolutely. You have to be careful. Okay. Okay. Very good. So that was the difference. Oh, now he says, here's an example of this rule that here's his example. Derech mashal. Hatzinoras hadakim u mevoz hahaskala b'yeladim hem shavim. Narrow pipes and the ability to and the intellect of a child are similar. Why? Just like narrow pipes can't have a lot of water put inside them in one moment. These children, also children can absorb many concepts in one moment. They're limited, okay, in their ability to absorb contexts. So in that aspect of their ability to absorb things, so they are similar, but not in other aspects, okay? You just say tubes and vessels and little kids, and okay, good, that's I think clear. Okay, so that's his explanation of what he calls nerochim, things which are comparable. They're either really comparable because they share the same sug or min, or they have the same amount of a certain quality. And then he said they could be shavim, equal or just comparable. Equal means they're really equal, as we said. You have just the same amount of love for one. The other love is equal in both aspects. And they could just be domim, like the minister and the captain. Okay, now he's going to talk about things which are not similar. Remember, we have similar, dissimilar, and then we're going to have opposites. It's going to be an extreme of dissimilarity. Okay, so this is called different, better and different. Okay, these things are called different, and we have different and we have opposites. Let's see what he has to say about that.
Okay.
Okay, here he goes. The bilti shavim, when he thinks things which are dissimilar, hem osam shema sheyesh be'echad enu b'chavaro. When things are bilti shavim, they're dissimilar, so it means that what one has, the other doesn't have. V'nischalek l'mishunim v'hefchim. So here's the two and the similars. We have the difference, the things that are different and opposites. Okay? So let's see what he says. So first he goes down the logic tree with differences. Okay. What's the mishunim? The mishunim, differences. Hem misparshim echad michavero below hisnagdut chazak. There's a separation of ways between one thing and the other, but not a diametric, not a strong opposition. V'nischalek le'nerachim u'mechlatim. And he divides it here into nerachim and muchlatim. Let's see what that means. Okay. The nerachim hem sheyesh hefresh ba'erkam zelazeh. When there's a difference between these two items, v'nischalek le'chalukim u'muvdalim. Now we're going to break it down even more to what he calls chalukim and muvdalim. So let's see what he has to say about that. The chalukim, okay, put it on the chart here.
It's interesting. He uses the same word, ne'erachim. He uses for them mizdamin, and he uses the word ne'erachim here also for those that are dissimilar.
Right. So now let's see how it's used in this context. Okay. The nerachim hem sheyesh hefresh be'erkam zelazeh. There's a difference in the similarity. Okay. V'nischalek lechalukim yuvdalim. Okay. Hachalukim hem shechalukim bekamos echusam. We say that they're different in the amount of a certain quality. Vahem yeterim o pechutim. You say something has more or less of a quality. So its distinguishing amount, it's very interesting. When you say something has more and less of something, you're saying it has it has the thing, right? But it just has more of it or less of it, right? You say one person is more intelligent than the other, so you say they both have intelligence, but you're saying one has more and less. So they're different, but they're different in their similarity. And that answers your question, right?
Right.
They're different in their similarity because they have more. This person has more money than the other person. So he's different, but yet he's similar, because in that aspect of how much money he has, they're both doing that money, but just has one more and one has less.
Right. So they both have it. They both have it. Whereas you would say that somebody who doesn't and somebody who does, that would go into a different category.
Exactly. Those would be opposites, yes and no. But this is really, they're different in just the amount. So and they're not equivalent, like our love of chesed and mishpat. These things, really, one has more than the other. Very interesting. So they're different, and they're different because they have the same quality. Nerachim, as you said, wait a minute, similar, different. What are we talking about? No, they have the same quality, they just have different amounts of that quality. Yoter or b'chot. I was going to give, and of course this Kal V'chomer is built on all, and this one is the basis of all our Kal V'chomers, okay? Because Kal V'chomer says that things are not only, they are built shavim, but yet they share the same quality, just more, greater or lesser. So let's see what he says. Klali hayaterim. What's the rules when things are greater than something else? So he says, Mishi polbo hayoter, yipolbo hapachos. The one that has more of the quality certainly has less of the quality, right? If someone has an IQ of 125, so certainly has an IQ of 110, or if he has $100, certainly has $50. Derech mashal. Let's give his examples. Im ha'adon baruch hu bora yesh me'ayin. If a Kodesh Baruch Hu, blessed be He, can create something from nothing, kol shekain sheyochel lekayim et hayesh. Certainly He can keep what
He created
is going.
Right.
Keep what He created going. Okay, that's a siba mekayamis, okay? All right. So what's the yoter and what's the pachos?
Well, obviously, to create something from nothing is yoter. To keep it going is pachas.
Exactly. So if you can do the yoter, so certainly you can do the pachos. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. The greatness of the Ramchal is that he lays all this out for us. I mean, these things, it's not world shattering, but the point is that it's just laid out in neat form, which is very important. Ma shelo yipol biyoter, lo yipol b'pachos, b'shmiras hayachas. What's the second rule? What can't happen to the greater certainly can't happen to the less in that particular aspect that we're talking about, right? If the greater one can't do it, so then the less one. If a normal person can't lift up a tank, so certainly a baby.
So what does it mean, Shmiras Hayachas, within the same...
You have to be careful that you're talking about the same bechina.
Right, in the same aspect.
Because, right, one person could be taller than another person doesn't mean he's smarter than another person. Okay?
Right. Otherwise you wind up making a kal b'chaim. You say if the tall one is smart and the shorter one is not so smart, so somebody who's taller is even smarter, which if there's no relationship, so then it doesn't work.
Right. Perishel. Nema derech mashal. If you were to say, B'kedoshav lo yamin. B'kedoshav lo yamin. This pasuk in Eov. In his holy ones, you shouldn't put your trust. If already I guess that means the malachim, you're not supposed to trust, so certainly you should be able to trust man. Upo nishma hayachas. Then here we are careful about the proper relationship. Why? Sheben lamei hadam ben hakdoshim. Ma shenikayim yeh chesron hamunaso yisbarach behem. Oh, it's the chesron of a Kodesh Baruch Hu in them? Yeah.
I don't know.
Mashen is yeh chesron hamunaso yisbarach behem. Yeah. Hashem doesn't trust his Kedoshav. I think that's, I don't know, how could be Malachim? I thought they do his will automatically. We'd have to get into the Peshat over there. But if he doesn't, so certainly man is not going to. Okay? And there is a relationship between Malachim and man in that aspect. Okay? Very good. So, Mashi Yipo Biyote Yipo B'chachos, what the stronger one can do. If the stronger one can do something, then he definitely can do what the weaker one can do. And what the stronger one cannot do, so the weaker one certainly can't do. Now, this is the whole basis of Kal V'chomer right here.
Right.
Okay. Now, what are the Klal HaPachos? Mi shelo yipol bo, Pachos lo yipol bo yoter. Something that doesn't have the less certainly doesn't have the more, right? And ma shemechuya b'pachos kol shekain biyoter. Anything that the pachos does have, so the greater must have also. Again, in that aspect, as we said before, right? Don't make some, height and intelligence. Okay, now he's going to make another chilik between the pachos and the yoter. Another very interesting chilik that we put over here. I think. No, it's not even on the chart. I have to put that in the chart. Od tzarich lahavchin ben hiyos double pachos o yoter uben hiyos yoter efshari o lo kol kach efshari. He wants to make a chilik between more and less possible. Let's see what that means. Perishel. Im nomar, if you say, Yoter hu hamsi davar chadash shelo yedua harishonim mi be'er yafi mashi yeduhu harishonim nibsa hachidish yoter v'habir pochos. Let's try to get that understanding. He says,
Again, yeah. Looks a little bit complex.
Okay, let's break it down. He's saying to find something new that the Rishonim didn't know is more possible than finding let's do it again. Finding something new that the Rishonim didn't know is more possible than explaining something better than they explained it. In other words, when they explained the term, so you can't explain it better than they explained it. They understood what they were doing and they explained it. But theoretically, you can take their terms and their ideas and come up with a new chiddush, right? You could say, according to the Rush and this, it must work out X, Y, and Z. Now, he never said it, but according to his reasoning, it would follow. Okay? So to explain something, to mechadish something, is more possible than to explain something better than they did. It doesn't mean just because it's more likely or you have the ability to find something new more than to explain something better than they did, it doesn't mean that it's more possible. It may be very hard to make a good chiddush. Lefi shehu yoter v'habir lo kol kach. Lefi shekol pachos ba'atzmo hu yoter efsheri. Wow, let's go slowly on that one. Let's do that one again. Yoter hi himsi davar chadash shelo yidu harishonim mi be'er yafi ma sheyidu harishonim. So his first statement is, you'd have a better chance of creating a new chiddush that the Rishonim didn't know than explaining something better than they explained it. So nimsa hachiddush yoter v'habir pachos. So it seems here that a chiddush in a certain aspect is greater than the ability to explain something that they didn't. Even though that's true, it doesn't mean it doesn't mean that it's more possible to say a chiddush. Just because the chiddush is more possible, it doesn't mean that it's going to be probable as you'll find it. Let's see. Lefi shekol pachos me'atzmo hu yoter efsheri. Everything that is v'hachidish shehu yoter ba'atzmo eino kol kach efsheri. In other words, it's much more difficult to say a chiddush than to explain something. Right? Say a chiddush is much more difficult than to explain something. Explain something just saying what it is. Mechadash is you're creating a whole new concept that you never thought existed or you thought differently. So just because you could do something doesn't mean that you're likely to do it.
So we're calling the chiddush of something new is called the yaser. The explanation of the dvar harishonim is called a pachos. So he's saying that it's not, even though one is yaser, it doesn't mean that it's more likely to happen than the pachos, which is the explanation. And he's saying the other way around. I'm just
trying to think of the words possible and probable. How do we translate that? I'm just looking at the book. How we have a talking clock. Okay.
It's right at the end of Perik, right at the beginning of Perik, we're in Perik Yadalit.
Okay, let's look at that. What is it? How do we say that? When a certain quality is exhibited to a greater degree, it is not therefore more likely to occur in fact.
Right, okay. Right, that's what it
I
sounds like
think,
it's saying.
right. So, I was just thinking about probable and possible. Okay.
Well, that's what he's saying. He's saying it's not, in other words, just because something is called a yeser, which
Right.
means in logic it has certain qualities, which really, you know, it's hard to explain to a certain extent why something yeser and why something not. But the yeser here is the ability to be able to say a new chiddush. Doesn't mean it's more likely to say a new chiddush than the pachas, which is just to do an explanation.
Right.
So in other words, Rishainim, what comes out from this that he's saying here is Rishainim have the ability to explain things very, very well. So you're not going to be able to explain it better than they, but you may be able to say a svara better than they.
Yes. Or you may mechadish in
Or mechadish they were mechadish. So
right.
that's yeser because that's more difficult. So let's go the other way around. Somebody who has the ability, let's say you find somebody who does have the ability to always be mechadish something that the Rishayim were not mechadish, then you would want to say that it's likely, or then you would say that he should be able to also to explain things just as well as the Rishayim.
Well, that's the correlative of that, right?
Right.
Right. Although he's going.
Right. But is it likely for him? But is it likely for him to always be mechadish something? No. Doesn't mean that somebody who has the ability doesn't mean he'll always have many more chidushim.
Right. Right. That's the thing about possible and probable. It's possible to say a chiddush, but it's not very probable. It's okay. We'll think about it more, but that's
right.
That's what he's saying. We got it. Okay. So let's stop here. We'll stop here.